Hi. I come to you in my uniform. I like doing this in the video way so much. The last time that I was like, you know what? Let's have this be the format for like a second. I don't know if I'll maintain it. I don't like to make promises on these things. We know this, but I enjoyed it and I liked editing, quote unquote, it as well, which was an interesting process. Sometimes editing can take me a second to do because I get so meticulous about small little details with cutting and things, especially in sound things. But per the format of this, I have to create a balance between making sure this is not overly edited and also the desire to want things to be visually appealing. And so it was nice to kind of skip over some cursory editing things like chopping up audio to like speed up my speech and get rid of all the pauses and all the ums and ahs and buffer words and just focus more on like visual things and such. I was even thinking about like, oh, should I have laid music in last time? But I don't think so. I don't think for this I'll be doing that. Maybe for other things I'll do that, but like for this, the most you'll get out of me is a little theme song I put in, which was fun. Like I've had that in my head for a second, because I'd be not maladaptive these days. I'd be daydreaming. I almost said maladaptive daydreaming because when I was in high school, I learned about maladaptive daydreaming, and it was the closest description, or the people experiencing it had the closest experiences to the way that I would daydream about stuff. And if you're not familiar with maladaptive daydreaming, essentially maladaptive daydreaming is people who daydream so excessively that it starts to like trump on their ability to be able to like live normal lives. Like they're constantly in daydream space, like borderlines. Like it's not quite derealization or anything like that, because derealization is more like you feel like you're in a dream, you don't feel like you're in reality, whereas maladaptive daydreaming is you're actively pulling yourself into dream space as much as possible, at times to the detriment of you being like a fully functional human being. And as a teenager, I related to some aspects of that in the sense that I daydreamed, especially more when I was younger. Like I still do it now, but like I just don't always have the space within my life to be in daydream mode all the time. But I definitely dreamed pretty excessively, and sometimes it did feel like it was impeding on the ability to like live a real life, because I was fine and happy being in daydream space, and there would be like people talking about how they would like spend time like pacing around their room for like hours just daydreaming instead of like going to do other activities or like things like that. And I didn't do like that per se. I definitely would have like mornings where I would just be in daydream space, or I'd spend time for like an hour or two listening to music daydreaming, or like I would go on like car rides and like daydream during car rides and stuff like that. But all my daydreaming has always been very mundane for the most part. It's usually just me talking to friends, and it's been funny as I've gotten older how much what I used to daydream about is so similar to my life, to the point there was a point, like especially last year, with my roommates who I'm like all like good friends with, where I was like sitting and thinking, and I was like, honestly, they all like kind of fit into like just, they remind me a lot of characters I used to daydream about a lot when I was like a young person. And it was like this weird like bittersweet feeling of like, not like I manifested my friends per se, but like I don't know, there is something weirdly like sweet about, oh, I used to like daydream about this kind of thing so much, about hanging out with these kinds of people, and now these people are just like my friends. These kinds of people are the people I just happen to be friends with, you know. But there's something to that. And of course now I know that like people be daydreaming hardcore, but it's not always in like a maladaptive sense, and there's like paracosms, and like if you resonate with this at all, I would research it if you haven't already, because it is always nice to know that like you're not the only person experiencing something like this. Like I don't usually like to talk about it very much. I'm kind of surprised I'm talking about it right now, but that's kind of like the nature of this voice note series I've been doing, is kind of just like free association type speaking. I usually don't like to talk about daydreaming or my daydreaming tendencies, because I still hold like a lot of shame, I guess, around it, or like I get a little like shy about it, because I recognize that like there is a juvenile nature to it, and I also don't want to seem like mentally unwell, but like it is kind of like a huge part of who I am and how I've experienced the world for most of my life. And I like it's really, really formed me and helped me understand myself, and has often been the way that I make contact with parts of myself that I find overwhelming to be in conversation with directly within myself. And it's funny even reflecting on it out loud now, because as I explain that part of it, I'm like, isn't this kind of just like really fancy parts work? Like this is just like really, really elaborate fancy parts work. Like if you're familiar at all with like internal family systems or IFS, like the baseline idea of IFS is that we as people have a bunch of different parts inside of ourselves that make up our system, who we are. And there's like a core self, of course, that's almost like it can be understood as like a version of our higher self or a true self that's able to like look at all these different parts very neutrally and kindly and compassionately. And then there's these different parts of us that kind of come out in different situations, and there's like exile parts, and then like manager parts and firefighter parts, which firefighter parts are technically similar to manager parts. And of course the exiled parts are like self-explanatory parts of ourselves we kind of shy away from or suppress, and the managers and firefighters are the parts that work hard to suppress those exile parts. The firefighters are usually like the more maladaptive version of a manager, so like excessively drinking, for example, in order to handle like social anxiety or feeling uncomfortable in a space, versus like your manager that's like, okay, I'm gonna like do my research and build my itinerary before I go on this trip, because I need to feel in control of how things are happening and where we're going and what's going to happen at any given time, you know? And those are like different parts of ourselves that will come out in different situations. And so when we're experiencing like heightened feelings about something, or we're struggling to like process something, one way to kind of sit with that using IFS is to kind of take a second with yourself and be like, okay, what part of me is reacting to this? Identifying that part, literally like trying to like picture where it is in your body, how it feels, and then having a conversation with that part to kind of figure out like why you're reacting in that way, in that situation, to figure out like the best way forward, or at least have a better understanding of like that part of yourself. And it kind of is meant to help with like self-actualization and self-acceptance. And so it's funny thinking about like my daydreaming tendency, habit, whatever you want to call it, that I've had for all my life, because it 100% mirrors that very, very explicitly, as far as like having all these different characters in my brain from over the years that definitely hold different parts of myself. And they are like people, they are like fully fleshed out characters with their own histories and interests and opinions and things, and there's a lot of crossover between them, there's tension between them, some of them are closer to other characters than others, and it's very similar to how parts work within IFS, because even within IFS certain parts can have parts within them. Like your parts can have parts to themselves. Like your parts aren't like just these like, it's not even like, I guess it's almost like Inside Out, to where it's like, if you think about like the movie Inside Out, like these parts of Riley, the main character, you have like joy and sadness and anxiety and what is it, like disgust, anger, blah blah blah, but they also like will react in different ways, and they have their own internal conflict, and like you could understand that under IFS as different parts of those characters kind of coming up in different situations. And so that's not like a novel realization for me, but like I think it's just funny to be like, whoa, right. And it makes me feel a little less weird having that tendency, and having had that tendency for so many years, because I've always kind of seen it as like a creative thing, and almost like a self-indulgent creative thing, because it's a form of creativity I can't easily output to other people. Like the storylines I have in my head and all the different characterizations, relationships and stuff I have in my head, like would be kind of hard to articulate in classic storytelling format. And there's just some stories that aren't interesting to tell, you know, because again, it's very like mundane daydreaming, and there's like a fantastical element and a very like fan servicey element, fan servicey to me, you know, as well, because it's like, yeah, I can throw my favorite characters in there, and I can throw my hyperfixations into the paracosm and do whatever the hell I want with them. And again, it's usually very like mundane hanging out vibes, but like still. And yeah, the 100% is like a certain level of compartmentalization, and it hasn't kept me from like engaging with those parts of myself. If anything, like it's almost like the characters hold them for me, and then whenever I eventually get around to like tapping into that, it's like, okay, this is very central, this character becomes very central to my life and my daydreams for that period of time, where I feel very like connected or close to them characteristically, which is very, very interesting to think about. I don't know if I'll ever publicly share the specifics of it. I don't even talk about it with like my friends, not even friends I've known for like a decade. So yeah. But that's not on that. That's today's entry. Random. I guess we'll find out why that came up today later.